Hi, my name is Kiri-Anne, and this is my story. So, back in 2016, around thereabout, I, without going into too much detail, had a injury at work, my lower back. And it limited my life a lot, but more than anything, it put me in a place of unknown. It terrified me. It was the first big injury I've ever had, and being a intuitive and highly sensitive and aware person, I couldn't make sense of it, and I freaked out. But yeah, this was the beginning of my inner journey, self-discovery, back to myself, my true self. That injury made everything in my life harder. Physically, I couldn't do a lot, but the mental toll it took on me, yeah, that took me to really dark places. I was very depressed. I was always a ambitious, go-getter, driven. I was the rock, always had been the rock. Being a mum, my girls were my world. They were the reason why I woke up every morning, and I love being a mum. My family, really, yeah. And yeah, just felt like overnight, just everything went dark. And it terrified me because it felt like the lights went off everywhere and there was no light, to see, to know, to understand, or to, imagine like you're going through a tunnel. You know, most people have been, I think, through, you know, one of those tunnels that goes through the mountain, you know, in your car. And as you come to the end of that tunnel, you start to see the light. Then you know, as you exit, well, I remembered being in that tunnel, and just most days, like, I stayed home. I stayed in bed. I isolated myself. You know, there was no light, like glimmer of hope, because like that was it. I searched deep and hard for it, for the light, for, you know, the drive, the ambition, like all these things, you know, because it's, you go to a therapist, like your friends, your family, they're like, just get up and do this and do that, without understanding what motivated those things, you know, is gone. Yeah, so it felt like that for years. So I turned to reading, Googling, astrology, personality test, all these different things to try and find answers to what was going on, to find answers, to find ways out. And so I learned a lot. I loved, I found out I loved learning a lot. And I would spend hours and hours, you know, going down rabbit holes that would lead to something else, that would lead to something else, that would lead to something else. And I also started to notice patterns or connections between it all. I started to ask questions like, what's the point of life? What's the point of this all? Why am I like this? What's wrong with me? Who is God? What is love? Attachment, suffering. The cycles and the rhythms of nature. and the connections between that and us, like the similarities, how you can learn so much through nature about yourself, about life, about cycles, about patterns, and yeah, and also the stars and the moon, and like how they all play parts in everything and affect us humans. And yeah, and just the connections with all of that. As well as past, present, future. Well, my past, how that plays a part in my present at that time. And then, you know, because your present creates your future. Yeah, how the past creates your present, and therefore your present creates your future. And so that really hit home for me. And yeah, so I as I said, I was very depressed. I learned to quote through my, you know, discovering, searching, learning. And it was what did it said like depression is fear of the past, and anxiety, which I also had, was fear of the future. And so I was depressed, wanted to move out of it, so I went to my past to understand why I was where I was at. As well as to, yeah, because I was trying to find answers to get myself out of this dark place that I was in. Using all the resources I could. Yeah, so I noticed that in my life at that time, there were reoccurring patterns that were happening. And I naturally, because I know we all have positive and a shadow aspects. We all do. And in my family, you know, a role that I assumed for myself was good girl, golden child. Like I wanted to be the best at all I did. I wanted to be the best mom, the best partner, you know. I wanted to do the best at everything I did, or I just wouldn't do it. I just always been like that. As long as I can remember, yeah. Anyway, so I noticed these recurring patterns. We all have good and negative aspects to us all. Shockingly, when I learned that, I was like, even me. Yeah, anyway. That was actually quite hard for me to accept that, actually. Because I always had such a big heart and, you know, so much love to give that, you know, but when you consider, is it polarity or duality, where, you know, there's love and the opposite of love. I don't know what that is. All I know is it's not hate. I think it's indifference. I'm not sure, but you know, when you're one side all the way in love, like, and I know I see this a lot. When people assume that position for themselves, they have put themselves on a pedestal looking down on others who are at the other side of that, you know, spectrum. You know, the opposite of that. But yeah, like judging, or, you know, no, this is what you should do, and blah blah blah, and that you're judging when you're doing that. Yeah, so long story short, my lovingness had its good and bad aspects, and I can't remember where I was going with this. Oh yeah, the reoccurring patterns. So I was noticing these patterns, and I don't know if I intuitively learnt this, but in order to change that pattern, I needed to change my relationship to it, because another quote that I learned was, the cause of all suffering is your attachment to it. And so I saw the pattern, needed to change my relationship to it. And in order to do that, I knew I had to go to the very first time that I experienced whatever feeling that pattern was bringing up in me, because I was the common denominator of this pattern. So I was the center point for it. I'm saying this because I always believed up until that point that if they change, then I would no longer experience that pattern. I would no longer feel that way. But what I learned was that that pattern was bringing something up in me, or something in me was attracting that pattern. So I just on my own, I would go and sit with myself and ask myself, you know, when was the first time I felt that, whatever that pattern was bringing up, like whatever emotion that pattern was bringing up. And then, you know, I'm an adult now, and what usually happens is, like, these patterns or these wounds, the beginning of these, so the first time these things happened that created a pattern which would keep igniting that wound inside you. I hope you're still with me, understanding what I'm trying to say. And I would revisit that first time in my mind, and as the adult I was presently at that time, would be able to revisit that thing when I was a child, and like re-parent my inner child, look at that scenario differently, and because as children we assume that these things that happen is because of us, and so as re-parenting my inner child, I could be like the parent I never had for my inner child and be like, no, they left because, you know, instead of they left because of me, they left because they, you know, had their own things going on and that they needed to deal with, you know, whatever. And so doing this, I would feel like a weight lift off me. And so I began doing this with all the patterns. And I had lots of them. Lots of why, you know. And so through this, I started to realize or think that you know, because when you go through hard times or bad times, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's thought this, you think, why me? Why am I being punished? Why is it so hard? Like, you know, and two, like growing up, you know, I know I'm not the only one. well, I was, so I'm not a deeply religious person, or, yeah, I wouldn't consider my family like, you know, committed church goers growing up. We went, but yeah, it wasn't like strictly every week or whatever. But yeah, through going to church growing up, you know, we were made to believe to fear God, or, you know, God was the giver and taker of it all. So be good or you'll be punished. Where was I going with that? Yeah, so I started to realize that actually everything, even the hard times, the bad times, the sad times, were for my highest good. And that quote again, the cause of all suffering is your attachment to it. That was an ego thing. That was a thinking thing. That was not. I knew I could think about things differently. That I could find a positive. I could find light in darkness. And I did. So it had me wonder, you know, you're always going to end up exactly where you're meant to anyway. So if that's true, then wouldn't it be easier just to surrender it all to God, to universe, to your higher power? That's another thing. Going down the rabbit hole with about God, and it doesn't matter, well, not to me anyway. What's right or true for you mightn't be right or true for me. And all that matters is what I feel about my truth. And, you know, and so I I believe that higher power, the universe, God, whatever you choose to use, you know, like even like other religions, and I don't want to go there, like a common denominator I saw was love. Love is all that matters. Love is truth. So I let that guide me, my life. Another thing is, I do not like I do not believe that God or higher power is separate from me. I believe that the universe, God, higher power, always has my best interest, and I trust in that. And I don't know what my future holds for me, but I trust and I surrender to a higher power, and I just listen to those inner prompts, those things that make me feel expansive, makes me feel like open and light and slow. Anything forceful, fast, no. Or fear, no. Gentle too, like when it's gentle, soft, slow. Peace, I follow that. And I trust that I am being divinely guided. I am being divinely protected, always. And that I always have my highest good. Yes, so I just follow what feels good. And I trust that my path will unfold as it needs to. And there's been many times where like it was very hard for me to get to this place through, you know, since 2016 I've been on this journey. And there were, like I was saying, when I was like heavily depressed, there were other moments where, like this was in the last year, where I felt forced. Not really. I say forced because it was so hard for me to do. I resisted it so much. I resisted resting because I was so used to performing my whole life. You know, I had this inner critic in my head. You know, I'm wasting time, like I'm bed rotting and all these things. And it was so hard for me to just let myself really rest. And I found that the more I resisted things, the longer I stayed in it. So when I finally gave myself permission to just rest, I move on from each thing quicker. And so, yeah, that's another thing that I learned too through it. So, yeah, I hope my story inspires someone or helps someone who may be in a similar position. And yeah, I hope you have a good day. Thank you.